Let's talk about this.
No.
Hello, welcome to our RecapPlus channel with me, Matthew. Today we will watch a recap movie called Black Warrant, released in 2022. This is a spoiler content video. So please turn on the subtitle and let's start the story. At the beginning of the movie, we are introduced to a special DEA agent named Tony and his friend Juan. They, along with other law enforcement officers, are en route to raid a drug house. During the ride, Juan excitedly shares the news of his wife's pregnancy with Tony, who empathizes with Juan's long-held desire for a child. Upon arrival at the raid location, Tony instructs Juan to remain in the car while he handles the operation with his team. The authorities quickly secure the individuals in the building, preparing to transport them to the police station. Tony and some of his team members ascend to an upper floor where they encounter a drug dealer and a woman amid a transaction. They also come face to face with a composed bodyguard despite the impending arrest. As the suspects are being led downstairs, the bodyguard seizes a police officer's firearm, sparking a chaotic shootout. Simultaneously, outside the building, Juan's wife calls him to inquire about the preparations for their baby's room. Tragically, the escaping bodyguard crosses paths with Juan, opening fire and fatally injuring him. Witnessing his best friend's dying moments, Tony is overwhelmed with grief and anger. The scene transitions to Nick, a man living on a boat, his floating home, enjoying some leisure time. Shortly after, his friend Francis, a government official, approaches him with a proposition. Francis discloses that the government wishes to enlist Nick's services for a mission. Nick, a retired former hitman, initially declines, citing his age and retired status. However, he is eventually persuaded by Francis, enticed by the promise of substantial financial compensation. Nick's mission is to eliminate a group of drug dealers plotting to undermine the American economy. Meanwhile, Tony, still grappling with the loss of his best friend Juan, remains in his office. Although his superior suggests he take a leave of absence, Tony refuses, determined to continue working. Juan's grieving widow confides in Tony, imploring him to swiftly apprehend her husband's killer. Subsequently, Tony and his superior embark on the interrogation of the captured drug dealer from the earlier raid. Tony presses the dealer for information about the supplier of illicit goods. The dealer reveals that his boss is more than just a typical supplier, he has grander, more sinister plans in motion. Tony's inquisitive boss agreed to the dealer's demands, a stay in a luxury hotel upon extradition and a plea deal in exchange for sharing the plan. The following day, Nick gathered his weaponry and changed his license plates. After obtaining information on his target's location, he promptly headed to the area. Upon arrival, Nick indulged in an iced coconut while surveilling the vicinity. He then entered an apartment across the street, disguised as a golfer with a bag that concealed a weapon for the hit. Meanwhile, the dealer, per his request, was enjoying a massage at a hotel across the street. Moments later, Tony and his team arrived to retrieve him. Tony instructed the dealer to change quickly for the journey back to the police station. Just as the dealer was about to enter the car, an unknown shooter fatally wounded him. It was revealed that Nick had successfully eliminated his first target. Tony rushed across the street to investigate the shooter, unknowingly encountering Nick, who remained inconspicuous. The following day at the DEA office, Tony's superior informed him that their undercover agent had identified a group of individuals suspected to be connected to the dealer's boss. Tony was tasked with monitoring this group. Tony and his team initiated a stakeout, but they encountered an issue. The hacked CCTV camera had no audio feed, rendering them unable to hear conversations. In an attempt to gain access, Tony posed as a customer but was denied entry, as only VIP customers were permitted. Spotting a departing chef, Tony followed her and introduced himself as a DEA agent. Initially hesitant, the chef, named Mina, eventually agreed to speak with him after he disclosed his identity. Tony asked Mina to discreetly place a recording device on the VIP room's table where she worked. Although she initially resisted, fearing job loss if caught, Mina eventually complied after Tony's persuasion. That night, Tony confirmed through CCTV that Mina had successfully planted the recording device. Simultaneously, Nick prepared for his next mission, observing a group of people entering a room for a meeting. However, the group abruptly moved away, preventing Tony and his team from ascertaining the nature of their discussion. Nick, meanwhile, entered the building through an emergency exit at the rear. In this scene, we are introduced to Hussein bin Ferry, a major supplier of illegal goods with a sinister plan to cripple the American economy. He has hired a scientist to create a sophisticated device capable of shutting down an entire city's electricity with a single tap on a cell phone. Shortly thereafter, Nick arrives and launches an attack. Nick takes out Ferry's bodyguards and his right-hand man, while Ferry, the scientist, and some of his men manage to escape. Tony arrives later, but the battle has already concluded. The following day, Mina is shocked to discover that the place where she worked has been closed by the police. Meanwhile, Ferry urges the scientist to expedite the completion of the sophisticated device, as the one used the previous night was still in the experimental stage. The scientist agrees to finish it but demands $50 million from Ferry, which Ferry eventually approves. Later that evening, Tony attends a party organized by Ferry's niece, hoping to gather information about her uncle's whereabouts. However, she is unaware of his location. At the party, Tony encounters Mina, the chef from the event. Unbeknownst to Tony, Ferry is surveilling him, and the bodyguard who killed Juan is also present. The bodyguard informs Ferry that Tony is a DEA agent targeting them, prompting Ferry to order his elimination. Tony spots Nick at the party, matching the photo on his cell phone, but Nick has already left. Tony attempts to chase him but instead meets Mina and invites her to join the pursuit. Unfortunately, they are unable to apprehend Nick. The following day, Tony resumes his search, eventually locating Nick's car and approaching him to inquire about his identity. To Tony's surprise, Nick reveals that he is Tony's biological father, who abandoned him after his mother's death due to his dangerous career as a mercenary assassin. Nick explains that he left for Tony's safety. Tony begins to understand his father's decision and learns that they share a common mission: to apprehend Ferry, the man attempting to destroy the American economy. As Tony is about to leave, Nick gives him a cell phone for future contact. However, before Tony can reach his car, the bodyguard and Ferry's men ambush and overpower him. Regrettably, Nick is unable to intervene to assist his son. The scene shifts to the scientist, who is questioned by Ferry about when the device will be completed. The scientist estimates it will take another 24 hours. Ferry's men then bring Tony to him, and Ferry interrogates Tony about the sniper who killed many of his men, to which Tony reveals it was his father's doing. Ferry orders his men to torture Tony. Meanwhile, Nick uses the GPS on the cell phone he gave to Tony to locate him. Suddenly, the electricity in the building where Tony is being tortured goes out, and Nick swiftly eliminates Ferry's men. Some escape, while others are killed. Nick rescues Tony and takes him back to his ship for treatment. Following the incident, the police, including Tony's boss, arrive at the crime scene and discover some of Ferry's dead men. Tony's boss ultimately finds the device Ferry intended to use to sabotage the American economy. The following night, while Tony was conversing with Nick, he received a distress call from Mina, who had been taken hostage by the bodyguard. The bodyguard demanded that Tony meet him urgently. Tony, driven by his determination to rescue Mina, prepared to leave, but Nick intervened, urging him not to act recklessly and offering his assistance. Upon arriving at the designated meeting point, Tony cautiously approached the bodyguard, who was holding Mina at gunpoint. The bodyguard instructed Tony to contact his father and request his presence. However, Nick seized the opportunity to fire a shot at the bodyguard, hitting him in the shoulder. With the bodyguard incapacitated, Tony and Nick pressed him for information regarding Ferry's whereabouts. Ultimately, the bodyguard agreed to lead them to Ferry's residence, but he demanded a payment of $1 million. The scene then transitions to Ferry's residence, where the scientist implores Ferry for immediate compensation, citing his family's financial struggles. Ferry, however, refuses to pay, revealing that the device is now in the hands of the police. In a shocking turn of events, Ferry shoots the scientist, horrifying his niece, who has just discovered her uncle's criminal activities. Shortly thereafter, the bodyguard returns, brandishing a firearm and carrying a body bag. When the bag is unzipped, it is revealed to contain Tony, who had feigned death as part of a ruse. The bodyguard, expressing his discontent with Ferry's stinginess, decides to betray him. Nick instructs Ferry's niece to depart, recognizing her innocence in her uncle's criminal operations. Ferry's henchmen attempt to attack, but Tony and his father swiftly eliminate them, including Ferry himself. The bodyguard insists on receiving his $1 million from Nick, to which Nick responds by advising him to seek legitimate employment. 30 minutes later, the police arrive at the scene, discovering the lifeless bodies of Ferry and his henchmen. They also uncover the body bag, which, when opened, contains the deceased bodyguard. The movie concludes with a scene featuring Tony, Nick, Mina, Juan's wife, and son gathered on Nick's boat, enjoying a meal together. Juan's wife expresses her gratitude to Tony for informing her about Juan's insurance, ensuring her son's financial security following Juan's tragic demise. Shortly thereafter, Francis contacts Tony and assigns him a secret mission in San Diego. To watch more video like this, click on the videos on your screen, and don't forget to let me know how you feel about today's video in the comments down below. And at last I will say stay safe and stay healthy. See you next videos.